There is now a significant opening on Oregon's defense, and I honestly have no idea how it's getting filled.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks. Busy today as always. Dakorien Moore. What do we expect from Dakorien Moore in his true freshman year? We shall discuss later on today's show. And what does Oregon do at defensive back? That's in the first segment and the third segment today. All of which is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here. There's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. New customers can bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. So, Kobe Savage declares for the 2025 NFL Draft. Now, he and Jamari Caldwell both were guys we had been waiting on for most of the month of January since the Rose Bowl debacle, to see if they were going to come back because of the Diego Pavia rules surrounding junior college eligibility and it not counting towards all of your years that you can spend in the NCAA since it's part of the NJCAA. We're waiting to see if they would apply for waivers and come back, but Caldwell declared. Savage has now also declared, and that creates a wide open spot on Oregon's defense next year, not on the two in the 2 deep, but at the top of the 2 deep. The other safety position, aside from Dylan Thieneman, your guess might be as good as mine. Thieneman, the Purdue transfer, I think it is a guarantee. Write it in Sharpie. That's a starting safety. He was one of the most highly coveted players in the transfer portal. So that's one safety position. But last year, it was Kobe Savage and it was Tysheem Johnson. And Tysheem Johnson is out of eligibility. And Kobe Savage is now gone. And so now you look and go, okay, who's filling this void? And that's a great question. There are a lot of options here. But this is going to be, along with, I think, the wide receiver depth chart, the most interesting position group battle. Defensive backs and then wide receivers. Those two groups I have the most questions about. Doesn't mean that I'm doubtful they can be good units in 2025. It does mean we don't know who's going to step up, and you could frankly talk me in to most, if not any, of these guys. In no particular order. Candidates that could fill that other starting safety spot. Aaron Flowers, Solomon Davis, who was a standout in the spring game at safety, Peyton Woodyard, Trey McNutt, Naeem Offord, those would be incoming true freshmen, Kingston Lopa. Of all the safeties or guys that could be playing at that position next year, because Offord's technically a corner, but could play safety or nickel for the Ducks if he's able to see the field as a true freshman. Dylan Thieneman's the only guy in the safety room who played more than 100 snaps. The safety out after Johnson and Savage that played the most last year for Oregon, can you guess who that is? It's not an easy thing to guess since he's not on the roster anymore, and that's Tyler Turner, who played 98 snaps. Now, I sent a poll out on Twitter, which is incredibly scientific, as we all know. And the results yesterday, they can still continue to matriculate in if you'd like to go vote. But I said, with Kobe Savage gone, who do you think is most likely to step up? As I'm recording this show, over 350 people have voted. And with a slim plurality at 34.8%, Aaron Flowers is the selection by those that follow the Locked On Ducks Twitter account or came across this tweet. Peyton Woodyard was second at 32.3%. Trey McNutt, incoming true freshman, 22.4%. Other at 10.5%. And that other, mostly, I think, was Kingston Lopa. So Lopa burst onto the scene for really just one game in a big spot in the Big Ten championship game against Penn State, and Tyler Warren, who was carving up the Ducks secondary in the first half. And when Lopa went out there, he didn't have as big of an impact. Now, there was more of a defensive focus. He got more double teams and safety help. But Lopa, at 6'5", went out there and I thought did a nice job. And I like Pro Football Focus grades. I think they accurately, for the most part, reflect how a guy plays throughout the course of the year. I don't think they're 100% accurate. His grade for the season was under 50. I don't know what it was for that particular game, but yes, he had a bad pass interference on a third down that didn't have to happen. Like, okay, made a freshman mistake there. But if you watch the other snaps, of which there were 7 total in the Big Ten championship game that Kingston Lopa played, I thought he did well against Tyler Warren, who was the best tight end in all of college football. It does say something that the staff felt confident enough in his abilities as a true freshman to put him in that moment to go up against the guy who's literally the best at his position in all of college football and was torching Oregon starters. And they said, okay, we feel like you're going to go out and give us a better chance to cover him, and was a big part of slowing Tyler Warren down in the second half. I understand why that is the common response by some people to say, well, he's got to be the guy. I don't know that 7 snaps is a large enough sample size, because that to me felt like a matchup specific situation, right? They felt confident he could go out there on passing downs only, mind you, and cover Tyler Warren. But they didn't have him out there for the rest of the snaps, even as the safety struggled in the Rose Bowl against Ohio State. So there's clearly still more development to Kingston Lopa's game. Am I intrigued by his physical traits? Yeah, reminds me a lot of Brian Addison, but who I always liked. And when he went to UCLA, good player. Had a pick 6 against Dylan Gabriel late in the first half this year. So there are a lot of different options for Oregon at safety. And it is most opportune, or inopportune perhaps, for this mailbag question that came in from Judson a couple days ago. Hey, Spencer, obviously I haven't seen anything official, but it seems like Kobe Savage is coming back for another season. All right, well, that's not happening here. But he said, how do you feel about him starting again next year? I know the Rose Bowl left a bad memory in our mind about him, and I know personally I have mixed emotions about him coming back. I would love to see our young guys take the step to improvement and be able to compete for that other safety spot, but with a former starter like Savage coming back, you'd have to assume he'd start again. This might be all for nothing if he decides to leave, and I didn't know. Well, lo and behold, that disclaimer ended up being 100% accurate, hence why you included it in the question there, Judson. But I think for Kobe Savage, I'll be honest, I'm glad he's going to the NFL draft, but that's because of how I kind of view the 2025 season as a whole. I've talked about this before. I will continue to repeat it throughout the entire offseason. I do not have the same national championship expectations for Oregon in 2025. I expect them to compete for a Big Ten championship, to make the college football playoff, but I don't have the same hopes unless they change my mind. But right now, I say this is a bit of a soft reset year with everything that Oregon is losing from that 2024 veteran-laden team. And so I know what Kobe Savage is. He was a multi-year starter at his previous stops, JUCO and Kansas State, and then Oregon this past year. I don't think there was another gear. So his floor is probably higher than a lot of those guys that are going to compete for that second starting safety position. But his ceiling is lower than a lot of those guys as well. And I think that's pretty clear, not just from the recruiting profile, which is, it turns out, generally a pretty good indicator of what a guy is capable of. Savage was a 3-star transfer, which typically when you're coming to a school like Oregon, maybe that means you're a special teams guy. Maybe that means you're a solid starter, but not super high end. And that's what Kobe Savage was. He was fine most of the year, got exposed a couple times, but throughout the course of the season, he was anchoring the back end of a defense that was really, really good. One of the 10 to 15 best statistically in a bunch of metrics in all of college football. So I would like to see what else Oregon can get out of that position group. Now, part of that is curiosity, right? The coaches know what they have in that room, and they understand what the talent profile of everybody is. But for me, looking at Oregon, I think 26 is a better chance to compete for a title than 25. And if you get a young guy in there that has a higher ceiling, I think you can get more out of that position if one of those guys is playing. So I certainly wish Kobe Savage all the best. Hope he has a successful NFL career, whatever that ends up looking like. But I think there is an opportunity for this defense to raise its profile compared to what it has been when you're talking about coverage from safeties in the last couple of years. And I hope that one of those guys, whoever it ends up being, is able to fill that void. But that void is very real. There is no, in my view, from what we have seen, maybe the coaches feel differently, I don't see a clear-cut, no doubt, leader in the clubhouse starter. I think this could be a completely wide open battle. And you know what? That just might make spring ball even more fun. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below, or hit me up on Twitter if you have thoughts. Speaking of expectations for 2025, I'm about as excited for Dakorien Moore as anybody in the country. And you know what you should be excited about? That FanDuel is a real thing that exists, because Super Bowl 59 is here. One game, two teams, endless possibilities, not endless desired outcomes for people like myself, but endless possibilities, technically. And there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, you sickos. I respect it, though. FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action with live betting all game long. You can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. Plus, a bunch of Oregon-related stuff is already out there. Win total, conference championship odds, national championship odds. They're very high for all of those. If you're more confident than me, by all means, FanDuel is available. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official partner of Super Bowl 59. There has not been a wide receiver prospect like Dakorien Moore to come through Oregon. There have been some great wide receiver prospects. Jurion Dickey, for instance, who we haven't really seen because of injury and experience in the wide receiver room, I think, are why his first two seasons have been basically zero impact for the Ducks. Or a guy like Troy Franklin, who, showed a little as a true freshman, and then sophomore and junior years, really good, really, over 800 yards, and then Oregon records for receiving yards and touchdowns. And yet, of those guys or others like Cameron Colvin back in the day, Dakorien Moore is the highest rated, most, I think technically speaking, Cameron Colvin was slightly higher rated, but Dakorien Moore is the most hyped incoming freshman wide receiver that Oregon has had in my lifetime, and I don't know that it's particularly close. There was one recruiting service, and by the way, Dakorien Moore is actually slightly ranked on 24/7's composite, a little bit above Cameron Colvin, who is .9932. Dakorien Moore is .9939, for whatever that difference is worth. But the expectations for this kid are sky high. I think they should be. I am all in on the Dakorien Moore hype train for the true freshman season and the sophomore season and the junior season, and that's probably all Oregon fans will be seeing from this guy. He is that level of talent. So there was one service that said, I believe it was On3 or in one of their scouts, that if he had been a 2024 recruit from this past cycle, he would have been ranked ahead of Ryan Williams at Alabama and Cam Coleman at Auburn, and behind only Jeremiah Smith. So that's the first reason that I look at this guy and say, boy, I have a hard time seeing him just, popping up here and there. When these other true freshmen at schools with the same sort of profile, there's a difference between a blue chip prospect or even a 5-star wide receiver prospect and what you get from these guys. They have all been expected, and all three of those guys delivered last year, and Dakorien is expected to deliver this year. And sure, I'm, part of the hype machine, putting that in your head, but that's where I think your head should be with him. He is a special athlete. He is a DeAnthony Thomas type impact true freshman who had 2 fumbles, notably in that game against LSU, that got out of hand. But as that season progressed, you looked in and went, oh, he's just not like everybody else. Dakorien Moore is not like everybody else. Athletically, he is the craziest route runner. I would be so interested. I don't know how you would grade this per se, but to have a route running competition between Evan Stewart and Dakorien Moore, a 4th-year guy, an incoming true freshman. They are both 5-star wideouts, mega talents. I mean, those two are sensational. But the talent profile for Dakorien Moore, who is 5'11", 182 pounds, is what he's listed at. More on that in just a moment. It's just one reason that I will gladly fan the flames of what this guy should be in his first year. The second reason is that there is a clear void on what he's going to be best at that, at least my view, and that's playing in the slot. No Tez Johnson. Dante Moore's coming into the fold, and certainly Dante Moore took his fair share of reps with the ones during this past offseason behind Dylan Gabriel. And, well, who do you think he was looking at a lot? Probably the same guy Dylan Gabriel was looking at a lot, and that's Tez Johnson. So you take that role out and you say, well, it could be filled by this guy or that guy. But, boy, it kind of seems like Dakorien Moore is going to have that opportunity. So I got a message from one of you out there that there was a comparison flying around online between Dakorien Moore and Amon-Ra St. Brown, who is an absolute stud of a wide receiver. Amon-Ra St. Brown for the Detroit Lions is 6 feet tall, 202 pounds. So an inch taller, about 20 pounds heavier than Dakorien, who is probably going to be able to put on a little bit of weight, but I don't know that he necessarily would need to. I mean, Tez was out there at, I think he's 170 pounds soaking wet. And he was Oregon's best receiver this past year. And, you know, he and Troy were both phenomenal in 2023 with Bo Nix, who you may or may not know is Bo Nix and Tez Johnson are brothers. You may or may not know that, but now you do. So I think that comparison is completely solid between him and Amon-Ra, because what those guys are fundamentally, they're possession receivers that have an extra burst. So the highlight that was going around Twitter, I think about a week or so ago at the Polynesian Bowl, was Dakorien Moore making this Odell Beckham Jr. style one-handed catch where he reaches behind in the middle of two defenders and then he pulls away from him, jukes, accelerates, runs by him for a touchdown. It's one of the craziest plays I've ever seen, not just from a high school kid, but from anyone ever at the wide receiver spot. Like, absolutely, positively insane. And that play, I don't think is where he is going to be the most successful. If you watch what Amon-Ra St. Brown does, he catches plenty of screen passes. They'll give him, some gimmick plays on an end around, or here, Ben Johnson, their former OC, now the head coach of the Bears, had that play against the Commanders where they pitch it to the running back going left and he shovels it back to St. Brown, carving up through the lane, and it's just, a shovel pass concept, but you start with a halfback toss to get the defense flowing. It was a really cool play. And he can do that sort of stuff. And he works short routes and option routes. And he works the middle of the field. And he can hit the deep cross. And he can hit the deep out. But what you don't see a lot of with him, Amon-Ra St. Brown, that is a lot of 50-50 balls down the field. I don't think that's going to be a primary feature of Dakorien Moore's game. I think you are going to see a Tez Johnson style player with arguably greater physical traits because he's a little bit bigger. He's a little bit taller as well. I don't know if you can be more explosive than Tez Johnson because, boy, he's up there. But if anybody can fit that bill, it's Dakorien Moore. So the opportunity, the profile, the team he's coming into, I think it is all there for Dakorien Moore to have a huge first season for the Ducks, and I'm all aboard the hype train. And right now, if you ask me who would be Oregon's leading receiver, I mean, it might be him. It might be. I don't think that's crazy in any way, shape, or form. I could see it being Evan Stewart. Maybe it'd be Malik Benson. Maybe it'd be Jerion Dickey. Maybe it'd be Kenyon Sadiq. Who knows? Probably not Sadiq, but I just think this guy has got everything you need to come in and make an impact right away. And I think that Amon-Ra St. Brown comparison is really good, that he is just a high level. He's got phenomenal hands, great route runner, not the biggest guy, but he's not super duper small. And he's just going to beat you because he's a better route runner and a better athlete with a good catch radius and very sticky hands. So yes, I like that comparison a lot. Speaking of wide receivers, I wanted to just throw this name out there because I didn't mention him the other day on the show, yesterday, talking about wide receivers. And it's because he got lost in the shuffle, got lost in my mind as well. But Gary Bryant Jr. is still around. He's got a final year of eligibility. Frankly, I thought he'd be someone that might transfer out to try and find a bigger role. If Dakorien Moore doesn't start in the Tez Johnson role in the slot, and he's more of a rotation guy, Gary Bryant might be the most qualified to be in that position. He's going into his sixth year of college football because he had a COVID year and a red shirt while he was at USC. But his fourth full year of playing, he was injured this past year, played in 5 games, had 2 catches for 12 yards. But remember, this is a guy who had almost identical numbers to Trayshawn Holden in the 23 season. He had 30 catches for 442 yards and 4 touchdowns. So he himself was a pretty highly touted recruit, not like Dakorien is, but coming out of high school, and he's going into his 6th year of college football. That's a weight room and experience and maybe a blocking advantage as well, because he's always been, I think, a pretty solid blocker for Oregon on the perimeter. It's just another guy. It's just another name to consider, but I'm bullish on Dakorien Moore. If he doesn't start, I bet you Gary Bryant Jr. is the reason why, because he'd be going up against, as mega talented as Moore is, he'd be going up against a 6th-year player who was a borderline 5-star recruit himself. So there are just so many options that wide receiver room. I can't wait to see how it all plays out. Let me know your thoughts below. What sorts of DBs are they going up against? What sort of DBs does Oregon need? Do they need a particular type? Well, I mean, yes and no. First, this episode brought to you by Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was waiting and wondering and worrying if you're going to get any money back, and then waiting and wondering and worrying some more. Now, taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day and not worry about your taxes. They have experts who will find you every deduction possible, file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy, all so you can get the most money back guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now, this is taxes. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live Full Service. Real-time updates only in iOS mobile apps. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. TurboTax.com. So, mailbag question came in here from Nick. I think I know where you're going with this question, Nick. You didn't word it perfectly, so shoot me a note. Twitter is the best way, or become a Locked On Ducks insider as well. You get priority mailbag access and a bunch of other perks as well. That link in the description below. You can get a free 14-day trial. But shoot me a note just so I can make sure I'm understanding this correctly. Nick says, question, would I be off my rocker? Yes. Before I read anything else. No, I'm just kidding. Would I be off my rocker if I said I believed Oregon in the 26 class should do anything to get tall and long with the wide receivers, even if you overpay? I believe how I interpreted the question is you meant for it to refer to what Oregon needs in the defensive backfield, because this has been a popular talking point amongst Oregon fans that there are too many short guys out there, that Tysheem Johnson and Kobe Savage and Nico Reed and Brandon Johnson were all 5'11" or 6 foot or 5'10" or whatever, and you can't have small guys out there. It just doesn't work. So I'm going to go in that direction, but if you meant Oregon's wide receivers, who are definitely not short, Dakorien Moore isn't that tall, but Benson is, I believe, 6'2", Evan Stewart 6 feet tall, and Kyler Casper 6'5", Jurion is 6'1", Justice Lowe is 6'2", 6'3", so they got plenty of height in the wide receiver room. So that's the direction that I'm going to go with this. But again, Nick, if I'm supposed to be going in a different direction, let me know, and we'll get back to that on a later episode of the show. With regards to Oregon's defensive backs, it is really easy to look at the heights of the secondary this past year and say, well, they just weren't tall enough. But now they're bringing in guys and they're getting tall. They're recruiting these tall corners, right? I hear that pretty often. It really is not that simple. It can absolutely help to have some height on the back end when you need to go up against a Jeremiah Smith. But there's so much more to being a good corner than just being tall. Dante Manning has better physical traits than Nico Reed. Who is a better corner this year? Answer, Nico Reed, by a lot. And Reed is 5'10", maybe 5'11", but probably, in the 5'10" sort of range. He was better than Dante Manning. And Dante Manning has, was a Duck for 5 seasons. 6'1", he's got that size, great athleticism. Was he ever a great corner? No. Was he a good corner? Yeah. capable, starting caliber, not all conference guy, but didn't live up to that 5-star billing per se, but still was a capable player. But he was taller. Should he have automatically been playing over Nico Reed? Because I think if you watch the matchups that over the 2 games against Ohio State that Nico Reed had against Jeremiah Smith, if you looked at the reps there and the reps that Dante Manning had, I'm pretty sure Nico Reed played better. I mean, Reed drew the offensive pass interference, should have drawn a second one in the first game at Autzen Stadium, and in straight up man-to-man coverage, Dante Manning got beat a couple times. So it's not just about having those traits. And, the guys that Oregon's brought in, Thieneman is listed at 6 feet tall. He's not a super Kingston Lopa style, what's the Brachiosaurus looking guy? Is that Brachiosaurus? The long neck dinosaur? I don't know. Tall. He's not that tall. They bring in Theron Johnson, the DB from Northwestern. He's 5'11". Do you feel like Oregon secondary has radically changed with those 2 guys? Like, yeah, Jalil Florence could be back and starting. He's 6'1", 6'2". All right, that's some solid length. I saw Triquez Bridges at 6'3" not be one of Oregon's top corners. Just because you have that height doesn't inherently make you a high-end player, and you can be shorter and be better than someone who's taller. For example, the staff came in. Brian Addison was there. I thought he was really good and rangy and did some great things, but they soured on him as the 2022 season went on. He's 6'5". Oregon targeted Clemson safety transfer last cycle, Andrew Makuba. He went to Texas instead. Go watch that guy's highlights this year. He made himself a lot of money for the NFL. He's a stud. He's only 6 feet tall. He's not 6'2", 6'3", or Kingston Lopa 6'5". Like, I'm all about discussion. I'm all for discussing traits and what that means. But at the end of the day, you're either able to produce or not. This is not, college football is not the NFL. In the NFL, you have to have certain traits or you will not be good enough. Dylan Gabriel was a Heisman finalist on the Big Ten champs and #1 team for a good chunk of the season in college football. He is not getting drafted in the first 3 rounds, or 4 or 5, or maybe at all. Why? He doesn't have the traits. The NFL is about traits. In college, it is about productivity. And oftentimes that comes from having high-end traits, but it's not as much of a requirement. So the idea of Oregon having a bigger, taller secondary, sure, I'm for that on paper. But if you have a guy that is an inch or 2 shorter and is clearly a better player, Verone McKinley wasn't super tall. He would have started at Oregon he would have started for Oregon at safety this past year. He wasn't a super tall guy. He was built kind of like Kobe Savage. He's like 5'10", 5'11" or so. And by the way, who's having a better NFL career, Verone McKinley or Javon Holland? Both were really good players at Oregon. It's Javon Holland. Why? Because he's got those traits. I'm still waiting for Oregon to find a Javon Holland type. That is one of the best safeties that the Ducks have ever had in my life. So anyway, should they do anything to get tall and long with the wide receivers that they're going up against and overpay? If you can find the right guys. But they've brought in a bunch of talented recruits from the high school ranks that are in the 6'1", 6'2", 6'3" range. Guys like Naeem Offord or Brandon Finney or Dakota Fields, or there are a bunch of names. Dalen Austin is taller. Roderick Pleasant is shorter, but they've got a bunch of guys that have plenty of height. But if you're not as good as a guy who's an inch or 2 shorter, I'm not gonna sit here and argue for you to be on the field just because you're an inch or 2 taller. So, hope that answers the question. Hope that was the question that you were shooting for there. Wanted to wrap with this because I'd mentioned him on a previous show, but Ryder Lyons is one of the top quarterbacks in the class of 2026. Oregon's heavily going after him. They had a big week of 5-star visitors over the weekend. If you didn't know, I don't know if Lyons was among them, but Oregon, Ole Miss, and USC are the teams most heavily, according to 24/7, going after Lyons. He is actually a mission kid, and what I was told is he's trying to take that mission for 1 year rather than 2 years. So Gatlin Bear, 2024 recruit, will actually be coming in next year as a 5-star receiver after a 2-year mission, and he'll essentially be a part of that 2026 recruiting class, but which still looks very good right now. But if Lyons were to commit, the earliest he'd be on campus for Oregon is 2027, and maybe not even till 2028. Though I saw Jared Mack tweet out the other day that Oregon was looking at a 2027 kid at quarterback. This is how it works. This is how it goes. But I just wanted to make sure that that was out there and understood, because I think the timelines for Oregon's quarterback room going forward, it can go about one of 17 different ways. You know, Dante Moore could prove me wrong, be a Heisman finalist, one and done, off to the NFL, and then Oregon's sitting there going, do we go out of transfer, or is Austin Novosad ready to go? Or Novosad could transfer out and Dante Moore leaves, and is Achilles Smith Jr. ready to go, or Luke Moga, or any. I mean, there are just a lot. There are many things that could happen with the quarterback room there. So just wanted to make sure that that was out there. And that's how we wrap up today's show. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.